Picture this. It is a regular weekday at Talladega Superspeedway, one of the fastest, most legendary oval tracks on the planet. The same track where NASCAR's biggest names have pushed purpose-built race cars past 200 miles per hour for decades. The same track that has produced some of the most dramatic moments in American motorsport history. And on this particular day, the cars sitting in the garage are not Hendrick Motorsports machines. They are not next-gen stock cars worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. They are Ford Crown Victorias, retired police fleet vehicles, bought off government auction websites for around $2,000 each. Some of them still had the mounting brackets where the police lights used to sit. This was Cleetus McFarland's idea. And before anyone dismisses it as just another internet stunt, consider what actually happened by the end of that day. Because what this crew pulled off on that track forced 3 active NASCAR Cup Series professionals to stop, look at each other, and admit they had never experienced anything quite like it. Cleetus McFarland is a motorsports content creator who has built an audience by doing exactly the kind of thing that engineers and car enthusiasts say cannot be done. He buys cheap, high-mileage cars and pushes them into situations they were never designed for. The Crown Vic project was one of his most ambitious yet, and it did not start at Talladega. It started months earlier at Daytona International Speedway. At Daytona, the concept was simple. Take a group of bone-stock Crown Victorias, get them onto one of NASCAR's most famous Superspeedway, and find out how fast they could actually go. A single Crown Vic running alone topped out at 127 miles per hour. Impressive for a car designed to carry prisoners and traffic cones, but not exactly groundbreaking. Then they discovered something. When multiple Crown Vics got close together and started drafting, using the aerodynamic push and pull that superspeedway racing is built around, the numbers jumped dramatically. A draft pack of Crown Vics at Daytona hit 148 miles per hour. That result changed everything. Because if a group of $2,000 retired police cars could hit 148 miles per hour at Daytona, the obvious next question was, what would happen at Talladega? Talladega Superspeedway is approximately a tenth of a mile longer than Daytona. It is wider. The surface is smoother. The banking through the corners is steeper, which allows cars to carry more speed without losing control. In the world of superspeedway racing, these are not small differences. Every dimension of Talladega is calibrated for one thing: raw speed. NASCAR Cup cars regularly exceed 200 miles per hour on this track during race conditions. Taking Crown Vics, there was not just ambitious. It was a genuine attempt to find out what the absolute ceiling of a stock, unmodified Crown Victoria actually. But Cleetus and his team did not show up at Talladega with the exact same setup they had used at Daytona. They made targeted upgrades based on specific problems they had identified. At Daytona, the biggest issue was that the engines were hitting their RPM ceiling too early. The motors were running out of rev range before the cars could reach their actual aerodynamic top speed. The solution was to fit shorter tires. Smaller diameter tires allow the engine to spin at higher RPMs for a given road speed, which means the motor can keep pulling harder at the top end. Because the event was held at a NASCAR-sanctioned facility, the series required that they run Goodyear tires. So the team sourced Goodyear Eagle F1S, which happened to be slightly shorter than what they had run at Daytona. More RPM, more top-end power, and a better shot at cracking the speed they were chasing. And then there was the Nitrous. Nitrous oxide, a pressurized system that, when activated, injects a burst of oxygen and fuel into the engine that the motor cannot produce on its own. It is not subtle. It does not gradually increase power. It hits the engine like a switch being thrown. And for the duration of the spray, the car produces significantly more horsepower than it was ever factory. The Nitrous was the ace card. They were saving it for the final top speed run when everything else was already optimized. The crew arrived early and began their session before the professional drivers showed up. They hit the track for warm-up laps, and the GPS immediately showed 154 miles per hour, roughly 10 miles per hour faster than their best runs at day, without even pushing hard. It was a signal that Talladega was going to deliver exactly what they had hoped. What they also quickly rediscovered was how aggressively the drafting worked at this track. At superspeedway speeds, the aerodynamic relationship between two cars running close together creates forces that feel almost mechanical. When you get behind someone, you can actually come off the gas completely and still accelerate. The car in front is essentially pulling you forward through the air. When you get 4 cars stacked up in a line like a wall, the guy in the back is only at quarter throttle to keep up. The draft was doing the majority of the work. This is the same physics principle that NASCAR teams have studied and exploited for decades. The difference here was that it was happening in vehicles purchased for less than the cost of a used riding lawn. Not everything went smoothly. Ty's car started smoking mid-session, spitting oil that sprayed directly onto the windshield of the car running directly behind it. At highway speeds, that would be a nuisance. At 150 plus mph on a banked oval with inches of clearance between bumpers, it was a serious problem. The crew managed the situation, but it was a blunt reminder that these were not racing machines built to handle sustained extreme speed operation. Then the RFK racing team arrived, and the tone of the day changed completely. Brad Keselowski, Ryan Preece, and Chris Buescher stepped out onto pit road at Talladega Superspeedway, a track they collectively know at race speeds in professional machinery, and were handed the keys to $2,000 Crown Victorias. Brad Keselowski is not just a driver. He is the co-owner of RFK Racing and a former NASCAR Cup Series champion. He has won at Talladega in a real stock car. He has competed in the tandem drafting era, when superspeedway racing looked more like synchronized swimming than traditional oval racing. He knew exactly what this track demanded, and he knew that a Crown Vic was about as far from a Cup car as you could get. Brad joked that he wanted to lower the ride height because he has been prone to flipping and would prefer not to flip today. It got a laugh, but also acknowledged a real dynamic. At these speeds, in a car with no roll cage, no racing harness, and no aerodynamic downforce package, a mistake would not end. There was also the matter of the $200,000 fine written into the rental contract for any damage to Talladega's infield grass. Nobody mentioned it constantly, but it was in the back of everyone's mind every time a car got close to the apron. The first competitive segment of the day was the known Nitrous Group Top Speed Run. All 4 cars, Keselowski, Preece, Buescher, and Cleetus, lined up, locked into a tight draft, and ran the backstretch at full throttle. Brad described the sensation using the image of a Newton's cradle. The back car hits the one in front, and the energy transfers all the way up the line, so that the leader feels every push from every car behind. The result of that first run, 148 miles per hour, without nitrous, without any special preparation. They had already matched the absolute best speed from Daytona before the real attempt had even begun. Brad said that drafting in a Crown Vic reminded him of driving a Cup car from the 1980s because the back end just slides around. There is no modern stability control, no sophisticated suspension tuning. The rear of the car steps out under aero load, and the driver has to manage it with steering inputs alone. For a professional driver, it was an unusual but recognizable feeling. A throwback to an older era of NASCAR, where the cars were looser, less planted, and demanded more from the person behind the wheel. The pit stop races that followed produced some of the most entertaining moments of the entire day. The structure was straightforward. Every driver had to make one full pit stop in their assigned box, and the first car across the finish line, after completing that requirement, the stakes were the Big Daddy wager. The 3 losers would have to call the winner Big Daddy 3 times on demand whenever asked. It was silly. It was also intensely competitive. Race 1 did not go according to plan, at least not for Cleetus. Before the green flag dropped, Brad Keselowski and Ryan Preece drove down pit road and made their pit stops before the race officially started. It was technically within the rules as they had been stated. Nobody had specified that the pit stop had to happen during the race. By the time Cleetus realized what was happening and what it meant, Ryan Preece had already completed his lap and crossed the finish line. Cleetus came charging into pit road sideways at 130 miles per hour, sliding through his pit box like a car that was never designed to perform a racing pit stop, because it was not. He called it technicality. Brad just smiled and said nobody told him they could not do it. Gray area? Absolutely. Illegal? Not by the rules that had been agreed upon. The rematch came with a tightened rule set. Every driver had to pit on the first lap. Same lap, no pre-race stops allowed. This version of the race was everything the first one should have been. Cars tandem drafted through the corners, pushing each other in pairs the way NASCAR drivers used to at superspeedways during the restrictor plate tandem era. The racing was chaotic, physical, and decided by the smallest possible margin. Chris Buescher won the second race by approximately 6 inches. 6 inches at Talladega in a Crown Victoria. The finish was that close. Then came the moment the entire day had been building to. The Nitrous top speed run. All four cars. All four Nitrous systems armed and ready. Cleetus took the lead position because he believed his car was the fastest of the group. Brad Keselowski lined up second because his car had the most push. Preece and Bisher filled out the back of the train. The plan was to build speed on the backstretch, lock the draft, and simultaneously hit the Nitrous buttons. Four cars for systems, all spraying at once down the fastest section on one of the fastest tracks in the world. They went for it. All four cars spraying Nitrous at the same time, locked bumper to bumper, down the backstretch of Talladega Superspeedway. Cleetus had one hand on the Nitrous button, one eye on his mirror, watching the cars stacking up behind him, and his focus split between the track ahead and the speed readout on his GPS. The cars drove through turn 3, still completely wide open. Every gauge was pinned. The engines were running at their absolute mechanical limit. The noise inside those cars, from the engine, the tires, the wind, the exhaust, would have been deafening. The GPS reading when they peaked, 159 miles per hour, so close to 160 it hurt. In a $2,000 Crown Victoria at Talladega Superspeedway, with a former NASCAR Cup Series champion pushing from behind. Cleetus said it best, "I think we're the four fastest men on the planet in stock Crown Vics." And there is genuinely no reason to argue with that statement. No organized group has ever documented a higher speed in a bone stock, unmodified Crown Victoria. There is no way anyone has ever gone 160 in a bone stock Crown Victoria before. The combination of the track, the draft, the tire change, and the Nitrous produced something that had never happened before and may never happen again quite this. Brad Keselowski's reaction was one of the most interesting parts of the entire day. For him, this was not just a novelty. It connected directly to his history at this specific track. Brad actually won the first ever tandem race at Talladega. The story goes back to 2008, when he watched another driver use a tandem push to deliver Jeff Gordon a victory. Brad studied what he saw, went back the following race, and executed the same strategy himself to win. Tandem drafting at superspeedways was not just a tactic to him. It was something he had helped pioneer at the professional level. When he was pushing Cleetus to 159 miles per hour in a Crown Vic, he said it felt exactly the same as those Cup car tandem. Every gauge was red, the engine was about to blow, and you just hold the wheels straight and hope for the best. The RFK racing team, all Ford men, were visibly impressed by how the Crown Vics held together. These cars ran at the absolute edge of their mechanical capability for hours. They overheated. One of them spit oil at speed. They were pushed, bumped, and drafting at speeds far beyond anything their engineers ever. Cleetus asked what other $2,000 car could have done this. The answer from everyone was the same: nothing. Not even close. Cleetus even pushed his luck a little further before the day was done. He asked Brad Keselowski to put in a good word with Ford about bringing the Crown Victoria back into production. Brad laughed and said he would see what he could do. It was a joke, but it captured something real about the day. These cars, outdated, heavy, mechanically simple, and impossibly cheap, had just done something that no modern performance car, no purpose-built machine, and no professional racing team had ever done in that configuration. By the end of the session, the Nitrous bottles were empty. The crew had held the buttons down for 30 continuous seconds on the big run. The cars smell hot. The engines had been pushed deep into the red for sustained period. Every single car survived. Not one engine blew. Not one car needed to be trailered off the track. They drove in under their own power, and they drove out the same way. 159 miles per hour for Crown Victorias. Talladega Superspeedway. $2,000 cars. That is the record. That is what happened. And unless someone finds a faster superspeedway, builds a better draft pack, and finds more Nitrous, it is going to stay that way for a very long time.